Hey y'all, Ginger here. Welcome back to my channel. As you can see, we are discussing James Baldwin. I know this video is late and we missed last week's, but I was hoping if we didn't see each other last week that we will finish out the book given the fact that it's the last week of June. Okay, so again, I want to apologize for the delay. It was my birthday week. There was a lot going on. It just seems like I have an excuse every month, which I do, but there will be less. All right? There will be less. Hold me to it, okay? So, with that being said, James Baldwin is, for the lack of better words, he's just extremely brilliant. So, I know when we left off at pages, I believe it was 62, and then there was 106 pages in this book. I just went on and read the rest. Honestly, even though we were scheduled to like read certain chapters every week, as soon as I started reading it, I had to finish it because it's just, he leaves you on a cliffhanger every time. Like, it's like once James Baldwin speaks, you're just suckered in. So he always leaves you wanting more. Like, wait, James. I think I got a couple more questions. You can't just leave me like that. I got a couple more concerns. You know, I find myself finishing this book wanting to have a sit down and have a more in-depth conversation on what he wrote. So with that being said, I'm going to get into some of the parts that really stuck out to me. And one of the first parts was when he visited Elijah Muhammad's home. To read James Baldwin's approach and how he met Elijah was so admirable. He talks about how, in a sense, kind of nervous, as if one of us were to come and greet Elijah Muhammad, to constantly see a sense of humility in people that have such profound positions in our community, and it's just amazing. So to get in depth, he talks about how he was just admiring when he first arrived upon the mansion, his nervousness, how observant he was of how everybody interacted with each other as he arrived in Elijah's home. I thought that was very, it almost felt like you were in the room, the way he was so descriptive of his meeting with Elijah. James Baldwin's approach is, I find, always respectful, but he's never afraid to challenge respectfully what is brought to the forefront of his table. And that's what I admire about him, because he questions things that, you know, especially during his time, did not dare to question. And then in our time, because of so much rehashing racial injustice and the brutal murders, and that causes such trauma in our society, it's kind of hard to, even for the most level-headed person, to have such a balanced approach when it comes to a solution to how to deal with these things and how to find our place in society. I thought it was very interesting when he, in fact, I believe it's on page, I hope I find it, you know, I know in these videos I'm usually all over the place, and I try to be as organized as I can. I try to be less wordy. I try to get to my points. You know, I do have very limited vocabulary. So I'm just gonna read this page. I'm gonna tell you what I make of it. All right, so it says, this is as he was leaving the mansion. He said, "It took to be mine. We always be strangers and possibly one day enemies. The car arrived, a gleaming metallic, grossly American blue, and Elijah and I shook hands and said goodnight once more. He walked into his mansion and shut the door. The driver and I started on our way, dark, murmuring, and at this hour, strangely beautiful, Chicago along the lake. We returned to the discussion of the land. How are we Negroes to get this land? I asked this of a dark boy who had said early at the table that the white man's action proved him to be a devil. He spoke to me first of Muslim temples that were being built or were about to be built in various parts of the United States, and strength of the Muslim following and the amount of money and its annual as the disposable of the Negroes, something like $20 billion. That alone shows you how strong we are, he said. But I persisted, cautiously, and in somewhat different terms. This $20 billion, or whatever it is, depends on the total economy of the United States. What happens when the Negro is no longer a part of this economy? Leaving aside the fact that in order for this to happen in the economy of the United States, will itself have had to undergo radical and certain disastrous, guys, I can't pronounce anything, changes. The American Negro's spending power will obviously no longer be the same. On what then will the economy of this separate nation be based? The boy gave me a strange look, and I'm not saying it can't be done. I just want to know how it will be done. I was thinking, in order for this to happen, your entire frame of reference will have changed, and you will be forced to surrender many things that you know scarcely know you have. I didn't feel that the things I had in mind, such as the elegant heap of tin in which we were riding, had any great value, but life would be very different without them. And I wondered if he had thought of this. How can one, however, dream of power in other terms than in the symbols of power? The boy could see the freedom dependent on the position of land. He was persuaded that in one way or another, Negroes must achieve this position. In the meantime, he could walk the streets and fear nothing, because there were millions like him coming soon now to power. He was held together in short by a dream, though it was just as well as remembered that some dreams come true, and was united with his brother on the basis of their color. Perhaps one cannot ask for more. People always seem to band together in accordance to the principle that has nothing to do with love, a principle that releases them from their personal responsibility. Yet I could have hoped that Muslim movement had been able to be in the demoralized Negro population a truer and more individual sense of its own worth, that Negroes in the northern ghettos would begin in concrete terms and at whatever price to change their situation. But in order to change a situation, one has first to see it for what it is. In the present case, to accept the fact that whatever one does with thereafter, that the Negro has been formed by this nation for better or for worse and does not belong to any other, not to Africa and certainly not to Islam. The paradox, and the fearful paradox it is that the American Negro can have no furniture anywhere on any continent as long as he is unwillingly to accept his past. To accept one's past, one's history is not the same thing as drowning in it. It is learning how to use it. An invented past cannot be used. It cracks and crumbles under the pressures of life like clay in a season of drought. How can an American Negro's past be used? The unprecedented price demanded, and at this embattled hour of the world's history, is the transcendent of the realities of colors, of nation, and of altars. Anyway, the boy said suddenly after a very long silence, things won't ever be the same, won't ever be the way they used to be. And I know that. And so we arrived in the enemy territory, and they sat me down at the enemy's door. And by that, when he says enemy's territory, Elijah had a car sent out for James and sent him to wherever he wanted to go. And it was on the white people's side of town where colored folks back then weren't allowed. So I know as you read it and as I read it, many things came to mind. And this particular passage stood out to me the most because in these days, we do know the Nation of Islam is way more prevalent, or we're just more aware of their presence in a very good way. I like to believe. I do have a sister that is Muslim. Me, I don't identify as anything yet. I am in a space where spiritually I'm really trying to figure out where I fit. A heavy believer in God. However, I am on a journey to discovering more of truth and as opposed to what was taught to me all my life, if that makes any sense, which is Christianity, to say the least. This particular passage just stood out to me the most because that part had me really stuck. And I'm sure that's why the guy in the car probably had a long silence, because it's a valid question. Obtain this land that we will need in order to gain this independence that will to us. How will we achieve it? it would have to be war. A lot of blood would have to be shed. And I think that's what he meant, that it has to happen in a very, because white people are never going to be willing, they're never going to willingly give up or give what they've taken. So how would this be achieved, you know? And I see why James was so cautious in his approach, because this very hope of the possession of the land that will set us free is what keeps us going, is what keeps us, again, for initially acting as cruel and as sadistic as our oppressor. You know what I mean? So so it made me understand James' perspective more, but I'm not too sure if even James has a complete answer as to how to do this. That scene it really stuck with me, even finishing out the book. It's something that I read over and over and over again, and I'm trying to figure out, with such a powerful community like the Muslim community, you know, the Nation of Islam has such power in numbers, has such a strong stance in our society. And I often don't question the motives. I know the motives are pure for the most part. Even though I am for nonviolence, however, to a certain extent, I am for violence if it's at the cost of the majority's freedom. Because that's how that history proven how we've gotten all our freedom. However, we're still in a space where, imagine that this is not what 100% true freedom must be like. There's still a lot of limitation, and I think last year during COVID year kind of proves that, you know. But then again, life is also beautiful because we have the privilege to live it and be alive. As many conflicting thoughts have ran through my mind, and it's almost hard for me to explain. And you know, and for those who are watching this video, if you have any thoughts, if you thought the same, if you felt yourself a little bit stuck at that part, if you felt yourself digging deeper and asking many questions based on that scene, please let me know, discuss below. I would love to know many different perspectives, especially on this particular scene. Given the type of world that we live in today, a lot of, even that scene, I could, you know, it feels as if something, you know, a conversation, a situation like that could happen. I wish my vocabulary wasn't so limited, because I feel like I have so many more in-depth thoughts that I want to express, because it may not be articulated in a way in which I feel and in which it is in my head to you guys. I hope that makes sense. But yeah. So another thing that stood out for me was just how much in depth he talked about religion, as far as his experience in the Christian church. His father was a pastor. He talked about his seemingly traumatizing but yet helpful time in the church, and he gives a lot of credit to how the church helped mold him and help mold who he is. I'm not too sure how James identified himself as. Just thought that was interesting, because we live in a time where most of us are, you know, we yearn to get in touch with our spirituality, get in touch with our past, get in touch with the truth and of our ancestors and where we come from, and being one with ourselves, and being more connected to a higher power. So I thought it was very interesting how he went in depth of his experience with the church. And yeah, so what I can say is this book is life-changing, eye-opening. James has always been one of my favorite writers for that reason. He's never afraid to challenge whatever is brought to the forefront of his table. He is just an astonishing, revolutionary person in our society. Let me know your thoughts on the book. What have you learned? How has it changed your life? How has it impacted your life? Have you recommended this book to anyone? Have you discussed this book with friends of a different race, different culture? What did they think? And yeah, so with that being said, I want to thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see y'all in my next video, okay? Bye.
Bye.